So I'll introduce myself first. I'm Ivanka. I'm a high school student from Minnesota, and I'm really passionate about climate and sustainability. And I first got interested in this space when I did a research project at the University of Minnesota. And then I also did a research project at Cornell University, and they're both about reducing enteric fermentation methane emissions from livestock. So I started MethaneMatters to educate people about methane emissions and their impacts and mitigation strategies, and just like climate change in general also. And so I've done some YouTube videos and then podcasts, and I've also done outreach. I sent letters to world leaders to like make them aware of the issue. And I actually got a letter back from the former president and vice president. I also wrote this book on methane emissions that goes more into detail than my videos. And yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today to talk all about policy.
Okay. So what would you like me to talk about?
Just like your general, like what you do, kind of.
Okay. Well, I do a lot. I founded and direct two masters in different kinds of environmental programs. One is the MPA Environmental Science and Policy Program at the School of International Public Affairs, which we started in 2002. And then the Sustainability Management Master's Program, which we started in 2010. So I have been, I started my career at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, first in the water program, and then in the Superfund program. And then when Ronald Reagan became president, everything I was working on got stopped. So I came up to New York and became a professor at Columbia University. But I've continued to do consulting work and continued for the next couple of decades. I've worked in the underground storage tank program, and I've done a lot of work on a variety of environmental issues as a consultant. And I've written a number of books on environmental policy and sustainability management. And the Masters in Sustainability Management program has graduated a couple thousand people, and the MPA of Environmental Science and Policy has graduated about 1,000 people, a little bit more. Wow. And they're all over the world as sustainability leaders, which is really what I see as my main job. I write a weekly blog on environmental issues and other things related. And I guess that's what, I mean, I've been doing environmental policy work since 1975.
Wow.
So when I started, this was a fringe issue. Very few people took it seriously. And now it's really one of the dominant issues in our world. So I've gotten to see this incredible growth, young people in particular who really understand this issue, and they see their future is bound up in it. So I think that's, I feel very confident that we're going to solve these problems. But, I just think that I sometimes say this, the human species is ingenious and we're not suicidal. So I think we'll figure it out.
Yeah. So what's your educational background like, and how did you get interested in the climate space at first?
Okay, well, I grew up in New York City. I went to James Madison High School in Brooklyn, which is the same high school that Bernie Sanders went to, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Carole King, and Chuck Schumer, and many other interesting New Yorkers. Then I went to Franklin College of Indiana. Then I went to the State University of New York at Buffalo, where I got a doctorate studying political science, but focusing on environmental policy and organizational management. Those are my two areas. And that's what got me interested in it, actually, was when I was in graduate school, there was a toxic waste disaster at a place called the Love Canal, where people in a neighborhood in Niagara Falls called Love Canal found that toxic waste had been buried nearby and was leaking into their basements, causing birth defects in children and people to get leukemia. Eventually, Jimmy Carter had to declare it a disaster area and buy out several hundred homes. so they could clean this up. So that was one part of it. And in graduate school, I worked on a project involved in water quality. So the EPA was doing what they called area-wide water management planning to deal with controlling non-point sources of water pollution. And one of the requirements in the act was that there be a public participation program. So we developed survey research projects to survey the public on their views on water issues, because we thought that would be more representative of the public than hearings or committees. And so my dissertation was on using survey research to represent people in water planning. And then I went to work in the water program, and I helped design the public participation program for that, and the same for the what was called community relations and superfund. So that's where I got started, but it all started for me at Love Canal.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what kind of work are you mostly involved in now?
Well, I'm largely an educator. I'm also on the board of a company called Willdan, and Willdan does energy efficiency work and renewable energy work. We also own a company called E3, which does environmental planning. So they did the carbonization study for New York City. They did the same thing for the state of California, and we do that kind of work. So I'm on that board, but mainly I'm an educator. I educate sustainability professionals.
Okay. So do you do like consulting or advisory work?
Well, I do some of that, but mostly now my work is done with students here
Okay.
and with research and writing. But I still do advising for organizations. But most of my work is in the university, because I'm also the senior vice dean of the School of Professional Studies, which is a graduate school here at Columbia. And then I run these two master's programs. So altogether, I have about, at any given time, 500 students that are in the programs I'm running.
Okay. Can you like talk more about the research you're doing?
Well, a lot of the work, my most recent book is on sustainability metrics and management, which is, there's an old saying in management: in order to manage something, you have to be able to measure it, because without measurement, you can't tell if what you're doing is making things better or worse. And so one of the big issues in the world right now is greenhouse gas reporting. So how mandatory those reports are, so that investors can really judge the environmental risk and damage of the different companies. And so our book really focuses on how to do that kind of measurement. And I've been at that for about a decade, doing that kind of work.
Okay. What kind of challenges do you see in the work?
Well, part of the challenge now in the United States is we have an ideological and scientifically illiterate person running the country. And the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, have been taken over by people that don't understand the climate issue. And so the challenge is, even though we're making progress in those areas, it's happening despite Washington, not in sync with Washington. At the United Nations, President Trump gave a speech where he called climate change a hoax and talked about the Greens, new fraud and all that. Well, meanwhile, everybody in the audience knew that he was completely wrong. And they sat on their hands, because all over the world, in China, Africa, Europe, everybody understands that it's going to take us a while to do it, because we're highly dependent on fossil fuels. But nobody doubts the need to change this. Even the people in the Middle East that have all those resources are desperately trying to transition their economy, because they know in 20 or 30 years the fossil fuel boom will be behind us. And so they're trying to develop new industries that are not dependent on fossil fuels.
So do you work a lot with like government agencies and policymakers to make these changes?
Yeah, I work with them, and a lot of the people that run these agencies were my students. So I have students who are involved in running New York City's environmental agencies. Actually, for a while, I was on Minnesota's Institute of the Environment Board, and I used to go to Minneapolis once a year for their meetings. So there are environmental policy educators all over the country, and I'm in touch with a lot of them, and we work together to try to decide how we're going to help educate students so that they can become the sustainability professionals that we need.
Okay. So what does your team look like?
What is what?
Well, your team, like who all you work with?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so like who's part of it?
Well, I work with people, like I have a research group that's in the climate school, and we have a few economists. I have an engineer. In my work at the Earth Institute, one of the parts of the Earth Institute is the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, and they're located 20 miles north of New York City, and they developed many of the world's first climate models. They actually developed the first map of the seabed around the world, and they do basic environmental sciences. They have a place there called the Tree Ring Lab, where they use tree rings to help them understand the history of the planet's temperatures.
Oh, okay.
And so I work with scientists, I work with lawyers, policy people, management people, because all of these problems require many different disciplines in order to solve them.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So do you work with global agencies like the UN?
Not so much the UN. Most of my work actually focuses at the state and local level here in New York. But I certainly have been to many global organizations, over the years, and I've traveled a lot around the world. For about a decade, I was part of a team that trained civil servants in Hong Kong on a range of different issues, including climate adaptation and issues related to it.
Okay. So are most of your projects right now in the US?
Yes, yes, and most of the work I do is local. Although again, in my research program, we're actually my colleague Don Gua heads up an effort where we are using sustainability metrics in China to help Chinese cities measure their environmental pollution. So about a decade ago, maybe even a little longer now, the Chinese government used to judge mayors of their cities by whether the GDP of the city is gross domestic product. And of course that meant that they didn't pay any attention to environmental issues. So what they did is they added environmental issues, but they didn't know how to measure it. So we work with the China Center for International Economic Exchange to develop sustainability indices for cities in China. And every year they publish something called the Blue Book, which includes ratings of the different cities in China on a range of sustainability issues. And so we've been involved in that for a while.
Okay, that's cool. And that's still ongoing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they actually, Don and our colleague Satajit Bose just got back from Brazil from COP30, where they presented some of these, the latest data.
Okay, wow. Are there any specific sectors you have expertise in related to climate change, like oil and gas or agriculture or anything?
Well, most of what I do is organizational management. So a lot of what I focus on is how do you bring into an organization a greater concern for the full range of sustainability issues. That includes energy efficiency, energy use, it includes waste management, but it also includes the diversity of the staff. It includes the community impact of the organization on the surrounding community. And so how do you get organizations to pay more attention to those issues is really what I spend most of my time working on.
Okay, that makes sense. So do you like consult with these companies to achieve like climate goals?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say climate goals, but what we work with them on is trying to get them to figure out how to integrate into their routines how to improve their performance. And I also study organizations that do this and try to explain how they've done it to other organizations. I'll give you an example. there was a team at Amazon that didn't like, it was mainly young people. They didn't like the little plastic bubbles that were being used in packaging. And so they studied alternatives for a few months and came up with a paper alternative that was both less expensive and provided better protection for products than the little plastic bubbles.
Okay.
So when you get an Amazon package, it's no longer packed in the little plastic bubbles unless that's the way it came from their supplier. So that kind of work is the kind of work that I am most interested in. How do we make those small changes that over time will make our consumption and our businesses less polluted?
Yeah. Do you have any other examples like that?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've also been working a bit on is organic waste recycling.
Okay.
So New York City has a mandatory residential organic recycling program, but it only is 10% effective. Most of the people in residences don't do it yet. It only started a year ago, and it's getting a little better, but I focus on those kinds of issues. How do we get people to recycle better than they do now? And to some degree, I've kind of given up on people doing it. And so one of the things that we've done some work on is whether you could have a mixed stream garbage plant where you use artificial intelligence and robotics to separate all of the different kinds of garbage and then recycle everything. So for organic waste, one of the biggest problems with landfills is methane. And methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, although it doesn't last as long as carbon dioxide. But a lot of it comes from waste dumps. I mean, obviously, as your work indicates, a lot of it comes from livestock, but a fair amount of it also comes from landfills. And so one of the things we want to try to do is end dumping garbage in landfills. So that's one of my interests as well.
Okay. So do you also have any expertise in carbon credits and carbon markets?
Not really. I'm not really an economist, although people, I know a lot of people that do that work, and we have courses in my programs that do that. But I'm more interested in politics, policy, and management than economics.
So what does the day-to-day work for you look like?
Well, I go to a lot of meetings. I teach a lot. I do a lot of writing. I do a fair amount of research, meaning reading things that source documents, government documents, studies. In my classes, my students do case studies of organizations bringing sustainability into their organization. And so I help guide their studies as well.
Okay. So what kinds of courses do you teach?
Well, I teach a course in sustainability management, which is a general management course. I also teach what we call the workshop in environmental science and policy. So I'll give you an example. We take bills that have been proposed, statutes that have not been enacted yet. And in the summer semester, we look at the science of these problems that we're looking at. And then in the fall, we pretend the bill's been passed and we develop an implementation plan. So for the last 2 semesters, has been working on the problem of lead in water in New York City. And New York City's water supply is pristine. The water itself is very clean. The pipes the city runs are very, very clean. But about 150,000 buildings in New York are connected to the water mains with lead pipes. And so my students studied a program to replace those pipes with pipes that are not toxic. And so I learned an awful lot this summer about how toxic lead is and how to remedy that in the water system.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. So you mentioned a little bit about using AI for some of the solutions in your projects. Could you talk more about that?
Well, I think when I started my research career, I would have to go into the government documents room at the library and search for source materials that way. It was very time consuming. And then when the internet came and I could use search engines, and the Library of Congress has a website called Thomas, and I can get all the things that used to take me hundreds of hours to find, I can find in 2 minutes now.
Yeah.
And so search engines made my research more efficient. What artificial intelligence is doing is, in some ways, it's a little bit like a super search engine. So it does organize the material and writes things, but what I find most useful about it is, other than it structuring things that way, it also provides me with the source materials that they're basing their conclusions on. And so then I can read those source materials and see whether I agree with what the AI has come up with.
Hmm.
Often I agree with it, but almost always I know more about it and get into greater depth. So AI is a tool that we'll all be using. It could get out of control. It could do some evil things, but I think it's a little bit like social media. That's gotten out of control and does some evil things, but it's also a very useful way to learn about things. So I
Yeah.
think it's a question of whether we can control it or not.
Yeah. Do you use AI for anything else besides finding information?
Mostly for that, although I've now redesigned my assignments, so I assume students are using it, and now I look to see how they engage with the AI so that it shows
Okay.
me what they know and how they're using their judgment to guide the AI in directions that are more useful.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, what do you think is the most important part of your work right now, or what makes you excited in the work that you're doing?
Oh, well, I think the most exciting thing is when I have a student who comes to me and we educate him in our program, and then they go out and they either start a great company or they do great work or they get a great job. A couple of our graduates started a company called Volt Post, and Volt Post puts charging stations for electric vehicles in lampposts. And so they have figured out a way to do that. So often when you build a charging station, you have to dig up the roads or the ground, you have to put in a lot of wiring. In this case, it's much less, and will help people in cities who don't have driveways or parking garages to be able to charge electric vehicles. So those are two of my graduates started that company, and it's now going national.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So, are you confident that we'll be able to stop climate change, like if we all work together?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is some of the sources of greenhouse gas, are really centrally related to our economic life.
Hmm.
Question is, how do we transition so that we're able to still enjoy the things we want to enjoy without polluting as much? And the good news is technologies are allowing us to do that. And we've already done this before. So in 1970, when we passed the Clean Air Act, um, the requirements were generally to put technology onto motor vehicles and onto power plants. And we did that. And as a result of having done that, the air pollution in America is 80% less than it was in 1970, 55 years later. So we can apply technology to these problems and solve them and still live the kind of lives we want to live. And so now we need the public and private sector to work together on this. That's happening at the state and local level. It's not happening at the national level in this country, but it's happening in China. It's happening in Europe. It's happening in Africa. Happening all over Asia. So I'm pretty confident we're going to get to this. I mean, we're going to get warmer first, and I think we could have done this faster, but we're not going to. But I do think we're going to solve it.
Okay, that's good. So, what do you think are some of like the lowest hanging fruits for sustainability or reducing climate change right now?
Energy efficiency. We waste a third of the energy that we generate, and we could instantly reduce much of the greenhouse gas pollution that way. And related would be electric vehicles, which are a better technology than the internal combustion engine, but it takes a while for new technologies to become diffused into the economy. And this one is taking a while here, although again, in places like China, it's happening a lot faster.
Okay. Hmm. So what do you think Columbia University's contribution in this space is?
Well, first, some of the most important work in climate modeling was done here. We've had actually the first mathematical model to predict the El Nino effect came from here. Jim Hansen, who has an affiliation with the university, but also the Goddard Institute for Space Studies in NASA, developed one of the two major climate models that projected climate impacts 25 years ago, and they have been proven to be quite accurate. And so the basic environmental research, we also, through the Earth Institute, brought people together from very different disciplines to work on this. So we have a fellow named Mike Gerard who runs the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law, and his work and his colleagues has analyzed and produced lots and lots of really good studies on climate change and policies and laws all over the world.
Wow. Do you guys also work with other universities?
Oh, yeah. I mean, all of us work together. So Stanford has a brand new climate and sustainability school, and they have a nice $1 billion endowment. We work with them. There are people at Yale, at Princeton, Harvard, at Duke, and the University of Minnesota. All of us are part of a single community.
Okay, that's nice. So another question is, what advice would you give to someone like me or a high school student who wants to go into something like this?
Well, stick with it. Learn the science, but learn the other disciplines. It's particularly important to learn how to work together as a group, as a team, because all of these problems are complicated and require lots of different experts to work together. So one of the most important kinds of expertise is actually being able to work in a team and really be somebody that people want to be part of the group. And you do that by really helping the group solve problems and produce. And I think that's that's really at the center of this field.
Okay. Yeah. Is there anything else?
No, I just wish you a lot of luck in your work and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was so fun talking to you, and thank you so much.
Great. Well, have yourself a great weekend. Take care.
Thanks, you too.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.